Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you've been enjoying what I've been uploading so far. I'm going to drop most of the voices in favor of more uploads. Hope you still enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Ceiling. Going Native, Chapter 13. With a loud clang, the ramp dropped and Ella Helium waved her pod forward, the group of soldiers stepping out in an ordered, practiced fashion to form a semicircle around the troop transport. Once they were clear, Ella waved again and the human followed them out into the bright June sun. He was a tall man with tan skin and dark eyes, wearing a body armor vest over what Ella had come to recognize as human formal clothing. He had been working with the pod for the last 3 months as a translator and native guide. Before the earth was folded into the Shilvati Empire 3 years ago, he had worked for his federal government as a professional hostage negotiator. His name was Chase Denning, and the whole pod seemed enamored with him. Ella had her doubts, but she couldn't deny that he was beautiful in that human way and had been an asset to their team. He had managed to talk down their last 2 assignments without a single shot being fired. This one shouldn't be too difficult. The interior's information was that a courier for a terrorist cell was willing to make a deal and the unit was just there for a pickup. As they approached the rundown hotel, the door flung open and several creatures bounded out the door. They loped on 4 legs, looking like miniature Raikiri with mouths open as they moved towards the group of Shilvati straight as a laser. At the same time, rifle fire sounded from the upper windows, ricocheting off the ground and knocking the soldiers around with kinetic force. Get to cover. As the soldiers moved to the side, looking to find shelter from the high-caliber barrage, the animals closed the distance. They had pointed ears and noses, light brown fur with far darker backs and muzzles. The creatures grabbed at arms and legs, trying to pull the Shilvati down to the ground, making them easier targets. Ella turned just in time to see a prone Chase's throat ripped from his body, blood and tissue streaking out in spurts as his life ended. The creature turned to lock eyes with her, gore dripping from its muzzle as it chose its next target. Ella and Ian were huddled next to the fire, bodies pressed together. The pair had sunk to the floor as soon as they made it into the cabin proper, and even with the pain of her staples pulling on her abdomen, Ella wasn't about to move from the warmth and safety the fireplace seemed to provide. Ian had asked what the animals that had been stalking them from the woods were, and Ella was afraid she knew the answer. Since the incident when the pod had lost 2 Marines and leveled a hotel, Ella had been terrified of dogs. She never let the rest of the pod know, but even the small ones humans kept as pets unnerved her. Like a good soldier, though, she had prepared. She did her research. They are called wolves. Pack hunters. They can surround and take down prey much larger than them. The humans breed them as pets and as weapons. I have had to deal with smaller ones in the past. The pair sat in silence for a few moments before Ian spoke. We should get naked. Ella just looked at him, stunned by the non sequitur. It was like her entire brain froze just as much as her body had. Not like that. Ian frowned. When Stace rescued us, he stripped off our clothes so there wasn't anything between us and the warmth. He was already stripping off his jacket, letting everything fall to the floor. Training kicked in and Ella's brain started firing again. She remembered classes at the Crucible giving her the same advice, and in a few moments the two were huddled together again, both in bare skin. Ella tried not to think about being pressed up against the male, his pale lilac skin and soft curving hips. His face had none of the sharp angles of Stace's, and the small tusks framed his full lips well. Ian had the spiced floral scent common to all Shilvati males and her brain was hardwired to find it alluring. This was not the time for this, but, well. Ella felt a bit of shame at her body's reaction during a survival situation and tried to turn away from Ian slightly. You're nervous. Ian seemed perplexed. Big bad marine like you, I figured you had been around the block a few times. She suddenly felt much warmer as the blood rushed to her face. Or not. Ella put her face in her hands. Please don't tell anyone. Iing's chuckle was unexpected. She thought he was making fun of her until he gestured to the cabin, the greater wilderness. Who the fuck am I going to tell? Ella could do little more but join in with a chuckle of her own, growing until the two were holding each other and letting out laughter in great racking sobs. Once they finally settled down, Ella felt much better, more comfortable. The harsh cold had worked its way out of her body, but she still didn't want to let go of Iing. He seemed disinclined to let go of her either. So, is that why you're so awkward when you're flirting with Stace? I can't tell what you're saying, but it looks about as subtle as hitting him in the teeth with a rock. Ian grinned at her and gave her a gentle elbow, taking care to not hit her in the staples. Do we have to talk about this? Well, it clearly makes you uncomfortable, so yes. Taking a moment to organize her thoughts, Ella finally replied. I joined up with the military as soon as I was eligible and was immediately stationed here to bring the humans into the Empire. I've been here since the beginning, and my superiors have felt that my experience is valuable enough to delay rotating me off-world. I haven't really had any meaningful contact with a male Shilvati that wasn't family, and every time I met a human we were either shooting at each other, they were just trying to get close for some nefarious purpose, or other humans murdered them for being traitors to their own kind. But you still think Stace is hot? Oh goddess, yes. She locked eyes with Iing, then smirked. You think so too? Now it was his turn to flush, his skin turning a deep blue. I have an idea, Iing said, trying to keep his voice calm. We can drop this conversation. Well, it clearly makes you uncomfortable, so no. Are you sure about this? Yeah, just follow the instructions and it will be fine. I can't read the instructions. Well then follow the pictures. Ella was laying on the bed, clothed again and holding her shirt up to expose the staples on her incision. Ian was leaning over her, holding a strangely shaped pair of pliers he had found in the medicine box. They matched the diagrams on the tablet, but the idea of fucking with Stace's work made him nervous. Well, Ella was insisting. It was her funeral. The brown plastic bottle in the medicine box turned out to have a simple 10% iodine solution in it. It was used for cleaning skin and preventing infection, so Iing tried not to be too stingy with it while he wiped the area clean. There was still almost a third of the bottle left, so he figured it was better to use more than not. Once the area was prepped, he wiped down the odd pliers and got to work. Iing carefully slid the twin prongs of the tool under the second staple, starting with the side that looked the most healed. The diagram showed removing every other staple first, so if it was a colossally bad idea you could reassess it without the whole thing springing open and launching out the contents like a sudden ship depressurization. Ella was leaning back and couldn't really see what he was doing, but the way she clenched up as the cool steel tool pressed into place told him that she definitely noticed it. As he squeezed the tool closed, a third prong pressed on the top of the staple between the other two. The staple folded into an M shape, legs releasing from the skin. He could see two little black dots of dried blood where the legs had dug in. There's one out, only 6 more to go. He looked up at Ella, who nodded. It didn't hurt much. Just go slow. One by one, Ian removed every other staple. He wasn't a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but the wound didn't seem to pull open at all even with half the staples. He decided to remove the rest, then gave the incision another wipe of iodine before cleaning the entire area with boiled, but not currently boiling, water. The end result was a pale, curved line of new scar tissue with 14 pale dots, 7 on a side. It clearly wasn't fully healed and looked a bit raw in the middle, but it made a nice contrast to the darker skin on her well-defined abdomen. "Well? How does it look?" Ella sounded concerned, but didn't try to sit up and look at it. "Honestly? Kinda hot." "Ha." She leaned forward and took a look. "Not too bad. Plus when you go to pick up a guy at the bar, you can wear a crop top and have a guaranteed conversation starter." Aang smirked at her. "You've got a hell of a story to tell. If we make it." Since they had seen those animals, Ella seemed to be a little less sure of herself. Less confident. "We will. We've got a native guide and a badass marine. This planet won't know what hit it. Speaking of, where is our human? It's getting late and I'm worried with those wolves out there." Aang noticed Ella's use of the word "our" with a small smile. She wasn't quite as bad as he had thought, really. He said a day or two and it's been, what, 15 hours? "I don't think we should worry quite yet." Without any sort of timepiece in the cabin and no windows in the main room, it was hard to judge time. "What we should do is figure out what we're going to do to help out when he gets back. Look through the tablet, we can figure out what we'll need to do with the Kubabu or whatever it's called. I have a feeling Stace won't be bringing you nicely packaged cuts of meat like I'm used to." Even before dozens of combat actions and 6 years fighting on Earth, Ella never considered herself particularly squeamish. She was always the first one to prove her femininity by doing some dumb stunt on a dare and had eaten her share of bugs on a bet. Still, though, looking at the guidebooks describing how to break down a kill into cuts of meat definitely made her uneasy. Kill a terrorist with a combat knife to the gut? Can do. Cut open an animal, spill its intestines all over, then clean those same intestines out to make sausage casings? No thank you. Of course, as her time in the military had taught her, you don't get to say no thanks when a problem arises. Which is why Ella and Aang were poring over notes, diagrams, and recipes. There wasn't an easy way for Aang to use his tablet to search, but thankfully the same books were on both devices. If Ella found something interesting, she could easily pull it up on his tablet so he could memorize the diagrams and look at the pictures. Couple that with the ability to take notes and Ella at least felt like she had given the male something to do while she figured the situation out. It was likely that whatever Stace brought back would be field-dressed. He would be draining it of blood, dumping out the organs, and just bringing in the meat. That definitely made her feel at least a little better. Of course, all of that was moot if Stace didn't return. Seeing those wolves had brought back horrible memories and she couldn't help but think how easy it would be for those things to track and take down a human carrying 100 kilograms of raw meat on his back. I wish we could see outside, Ella mused. If those wolves are still out there we might be able to get some meat right now. Why would Stace build a cabin with no windows? Aang shrugged. The front room has windows. Ella stared at him for a second. She could remember seeing those dogs pouncing, leaping through the air. Could she have missed such an obvious weak point in their defenses? Seeming to follow her train of thought, Aang clarified. They are boarded up with blocks of wood. Matches the rest of the cabin pretty well, actually. Though she desperately wanted to go take a look, Ella had to be smarter than that. Aang had removed her staples, but the pulling she felt whenever she moved told her that the healing was far from done. She hadn't gotten out of bed since he had finished the operation, and probably shouldn't for the rest of the day. I can take a look, if you want, Aang said. He made to get up from the chair next to the bed and she reached out to grab his arm. Absolutely not. Those things can jump and the last thing I want is to have to explain to the human how his bed buddy got pulled out of the window and into the night. The young man's skin flushed, going from lilac to blue in an instant. Hey, I slept in your bed last night. Yeah, and it bothered our human so much that he ran away. Ella smirked. Seriously, though, I don't want you opening a window unless I'm there ready to shoot whatever comes in. Ian paused, collecting his thoughts. What about Stace? If those things are waiting out there, won't he need our help once he gets back to the cabin? We'll sleep in shifts. He's clever, even for a human. If Stace needs help when he gets close, he will probably signal us somehow. We just need to make sure one of us is up at all times to notice. Ella took first shift, letting Ian sleep curled up in the bed while she sat in the chair next to the fire. By the time morning rolled around, she was asleep in her chair. Of Stace, there was no sign. Ian was mad. No, it went far beyond that, he was furious. When he realized that Ella hadn't woken him for his shift, his first thought was to slap her upside the head, to scream at her. Stace wasn't around, the door was still barred, and nobody was looking out for him. Instead, Ian suited up, grabbed the pistol, and unbarred the door. He was far too angry to be nervous and he practically flung the heavy wooden planks open, daring whatever was outside to come and get him. The strange, dangerous creatures were gone. In their place were hundreds of paw prints, evidence of their visitation the day before. Heedless of the cold or the danger, Ian began to circle the cabin, looking for the larger tracks of boots in the snow. It was easy to find the path Stace had taken away from the cabin, but he found no sign of his return. Ian let out a sigh and with it some of the impotent rage he was feeling. He had been terrified that he would come out to find that Stace had made it to the cabin, only to die at its doorstep from the cold or the wolves or worse. Even if Stace had made it all the way to the door, it had still been barred. When he heard his name being called from the door, most of the anger returned. Ian. He had left the door open, and the cold must have awakened Ella. Looking at her standing in the doorway, shivering in her bare feet, she looked so small. This place seemed to diminish everyone brought to it, except perhaps their native guide. As he walked his way back to the cabin, Ian let go of the last for the rage. They would have a talk about the situation, but there was no point in yelling at the injured Marine. The cold made it easy to throw out something as unnecessary as anger. It wouldn't keep them alive. Ella's chattering teeth as she closed the door behind him would have been funny in any other situation. Instead of laughing, the diminutive male just shook his head sadly. We have to do better, the both of us. We're not going to make it otherwise. The soldier nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. The pair started their second day alone with 2 blank pages on their tablets and Ian sorting the miscellaneous pile of outdoor clothing Stace kept in the small room to the outside. While nothing would fit either of the Shilvati, the human's deft work with the needle and thread earlier gave the pair hope that something could be done. Do you know how to sew? Ian asked Ella as he shook out what appeared to be a pair of pants made from an animal skin with the fur still on. Why the fuck would I know how to sew? Ella's words were combative, but her tone was pleasant and it took the sting out. That's definitely something that should be more your speed. Bitch, I don't even buy off the rack when I can help it. I sure as hell don't make my own clothing. Ian chuckled at the thought. I suppose one of us will have to learn. Stace can sew. I mean, he made all of. She gestured from the main room at the pile through the open door. That. I think everything he wore when he left to hunt was homemade too. Ella sighed. I never thought I'd be pining for a muscular, feral-looking human to come find me just so he can be all domestic. Taking inventory of what was in the cabin would be incredibly useful and was honestly something that they should have done on their first day awake. As Ian began writing down his best guess of what each tool in the rack by the door was, he heard the distinctive sound of a drawer sliding open. Maybe I should do that. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, Click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff. Visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.